Hi, thank you for joining us for a 5-minute Bible study today. We continue in the book of Colossians. We're in chapter 1, verse 28. Once again, as always, go ahead and read the context around this verse. That would be verse 24 through 29. So you get a full understanding of what we're talking about here today in verse 28. Verse 28 says this: We proclaim him, admonishing every man and teaching every man with all wisdom, so that we may present every man complete in Christ. So, a lot of stuff going on there. We're going to go right from the beginning. Notice he says we. Up to this point, throughout this whole section, Paul's been talking about I. He's been trying to explain how he is an apostle of Jesus Christ, which is why the Colossians need to listen to him rather than the false teachers. So this whole section has been about Paul. But here, just out of the clear blue, and just this one time, he switches it to we. Now, who is we? It's probably Timothy and Epaphras, who he'd mentioned earlier in the letter, but it's also probably the rest of the apostles. In other words, Paul's saying, it's not just me telling you this. I'm standing here writing this letter, but it's all of us who say the same thing. So you can listen to us, or you can listen to the false teachers. So we proclaim him. And who are they proclaiming? Jesus. Just before this, in verse 27, we read about Christ in you, the hope of glory. Christ in you, the hope of glory. He is who we proclaim. We proclaim him, Jesus, admonishing every man, teaching every man. So that word man in the Greek is actually a word that means person or human being. So we can probably better translate this rather than man as every person. So it says admonishing every person and teaching every person. And what is this admonishing and teaching? Well, they define what it means to proclaim him. So we proclaim him, admonishing every man and teaching every man. What does it look like to proclaim? It looks like admonishing and teaching, which is very interesting because today we do have proclamations happening in the church, but unfortunately there's not a lot of admonition happening in the church. There's a lot of teaching happening in the church, but we need more admonition, to be quite honest. So what does that mean to admonish? Well, admonish is to speak to the mind, to explain wrong thinking. So people think incorrectly. They don't believe something correctly, or they think something incorrectly. And admonishing is putting them on the right path, telling them that they're wrong, telling them that this is wrong thinking, this is what right thinking looks like. So that's admonishing. It's confrontational, absolutely is. And who says that Christianity is not confrontational? It should be, and it is confrontational. But in this day and age of political correctness, too often the church decides that it's better to not be confrontational so we don't lose too many members. But that's not what it is to be a Christian, especially a Christian teacher. And that's who Paul is. Paul's a Christian apostle. And what do the apostles do? They admonish and teach. That's what Jesus did. So just following his footsteps. So we need to be there. We need to be at a place where we're admonishing and teaching. So we're admonishing, we're confronting people, we're telling them that their thinking is wrong and this is the right way of thinking, and we're teaching. Teaching is to explain something. So all these things speak to head knowledge. It speaks to wrong thinking. It speaks to right thinking. But notice it says right after that, admonishing every man and teaching every man with all wisdom. So wisdom is not just knowledge, but it's the use of knowledge. It's how do we implement the knowledge we have. And so wisdom speaks to more than just knowledge. It speaks to behavior. It speaks to heart. It speaks to activity and actions. So wisdom is where we want to get to. So we need that knowledge so we can get to wisdom. So we admonish every man, we teach every man with all wisdom, so that we may present every man complete in Christ. So the objective here is to present every man complete in Christ. If you're not teaching and admonishing, you're going to fall short of that completeness, of that fullness in Christ. We want to be full in Christ. We want to be complete in Christ. And notice it's not just a couple of people. It's every person. Now, that doesn't mean every person in the whole world, because there are going to be people who aren't Christians, and obviously this is going to fall on deaf ears. It's every Christian, every believer. So everyone who we're speaking to, sharing the gospel with, going into churches too and sharing this gospel. We're presenting Christ. We're admonishing them. We're teaching them in all wisdom to present them complete in Christ. And that's Paul's goal, is to have a perfect church. So with that, we conclude verse 28. Thank you for being with me today. It was really great to have you. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. And until then, God bless you.